Up next, what's this new thing called Inside the SCCA? Hello everybody, I'm Brian Belansky, and this is Inside the SCCA. So what is Inside the SCCA? Well, it's the latest offering from the Racing Wire Podcast Network. It's a weekly podcast about all things SCCA. We're going to cover everything from driver profiles, legends of the club, tech tips, exploring each class, and product reviews. We'll have episodes on all the club's programs from road racing to solo, track days, road rally, rallycross, track night in America, and time trials, and whatever else I may have forgotten there, and whatever else comes up new over time as well. Over time, we'll talk about all of the volunteer specialties, and we'll do that often. Volunteers are the backbone of everything the SCCA does. We'll also help people who are trying to figure out how to get started. And we'll promote events. If your region has an event you would like us to talk about, send us some info at least a month in advance, and we'll make mention of it on the show. Send me an email at raceannouncerbrian@gmail.com. A little about me. I've been a member off and on, but mostly on since 1986. I started my SCCA life as Dad's, air quotes, crew chief, when all I knew how to do was change tires, check air pressures, and fill the gas tank. From there, I've built cars from the ground up, driven some of those race cars, worked as a flagger, starter, tech inspector. I did a stint as the flag chief for New York region. Now I spend most of my time as a race announcer and content creator. Being a TV news producer by trade has taken me all over the country. That's given me the chance to be a member of a bunch of regions: Chicago, Milwaukee, Land O'Lakes, Atlanta, New Jersey, New York, D.C., and now Cal Club. I don't think I've missed any in that list. Anyway, I've also raced or flagged at tracks in all of those areas, but most importantly, some of my best friends, people I consider family, have come from this club. Inside the SCCA is not sponsored by the club. I feel it's important to have an independent voice. It will allow us to have the tough conversations. But I want one thing to be clear. This is not going to be a podcast where we're going to go around and bash the club. I love this organization. It has its problems, and I'm the first to point them out. But all of the discussions on this podcast will be with one thing in mind: making the club better and attractive to both the old guard and people just starting out. New episodes will drop every Friday. That will give everyone something to listen to on their way to the track for race weekends. So that's Inside the SCCA today. I say today because any podcast with a long history will evolve over time, and I plan to be doing this for many years to come. So with that, let's get on to our premiere episode. Our guest today, Jason Pribyl. Jason started his driving career in kid karts in 2011. From there, he moved to full-size karts, competing at both the local and national level, often driving more than one class per weekend. In 2017, he began focusing fully on road racing with endurance karts. In 2019, he got his full comp license at the ripe old age of 14. Started in Formula 4. This year, he went to the Runoffs in FE2. He's a junior in high school with an eye on going to college for motorsports engineering. Jason, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to have you on because your path, well, let's start. There is no traditional path to get into racing unless you have a very a name like Andretti or Petty or something like that. But for most of us, there's lots of different ways to get into the sport. But one of the ways that's least traditional, I guess, is for a youngster to get involved at a very young age when their family isn't already a racing family. And that's kind of your story, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
So at age, you got into kid karts. How old were you at that point in time?
The first time I'd gotten into a kid kart, we had done some testing at Road America. I was 6 at the time. 6.
So if you didn't come from a racing family, how did you get hooked on this crazy sport that we call road racing?
All right. So luckily enough, my family, my father's side, his father and his friends, they enjoyed watching racing, at least. So they would head down to Road America to watch races like the June Sprints, IMSA, things like that. Then there came a time where my father went with him. And then once I became old enough, my father took me to the Supermoto or Moto America's race at Road America, and right next to where we were camping was a kart track. So that kind of caught my eye a little bit. And the combination of both just watching the motorbikes go by fast every single lap and seeing the karts right next to me kind of helped me realize what I might want to do.
There you go. There you go. So in the end, it really was Dad's fault.
Oh, yeah.
Your path and my path were kind of similar in that regard. My dad was a racer back in the 60s. And back in the late 80s, middle 80s, he decided to get back into a race car. And that's when I was a teenager. So that was kind of my introduction to the sport. And then my best friend's dad, who was also a gearhead, took me to Road America for IMSA. And two things happened to me at Road America. I discovered bikinis and the fact that I loved cars, both of which, kind of set me on a course for life. But yeah, so same type of an experience, I'm sure, with the June sprints and all of that kind of stuff. So you're in kid karts, you're 6 years old. A lot of kids at that age dabble, play around, have some fun, get bored, want to go back to their PlayStation or whatever the case may be. You stuck with it. What was your experience like in those first couple of years?
First couple of years, as expected, I was learning how to drive and learning how to, keep the cart on the track. Kid kart year, that second part didn't go so well, but it just comes with racing. First year of kid karts, I ran at 3 tracks and mainly at Road America in the kid kart class, and then year after I moved up. So going from kid karts, first year of racing, and then moving up a class right after was definitely difficult for me, but it just comes with the learning capabilities that you need as a driver. And then, so yeah, the first few years were, I can't say they were anything special, but they definitely led me at some point to where I am right now.
Right. So at Road America, you weren't on the big track, right? You were on there's a secondary, just a purpose-built kart track at Road America somewhere on the facility, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
there was right on the outside of Turn 8, there is a kartplex. It's fairly large, but there was a kid kart track that we would be able to run small, not too hilly things like that.
Cool. So at what point, when did you first get yourself onto the big track?
The year I moved out of kid karts.
Okay.
With my dad not having any experience in the racing world from a team perspective, he didn't really know what to do. So he went around asking different series. We had started in 206 Sportsman, running club at Concept College Motor Speedway, as well as Mid-American Sprint Series. And we also called Championship Enduro Series, which is a road racing series. Somehow we managed to get myself onto Gateway Motorplex, which is now Worldwide Technology Raceway, at 7 years old. And that's when I started running on the big courses.
Was that a skirting of the rules to get you on at that age, or did they know what was going on?
So they definitely knew what was going on. I can't be sure what my answer, or I guess we didn't skirt. It was technically.
Don't worry about it. We'll move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of know what the answer is without having to get the answer, which is fine. 7
Yeah.
years old on a big track for the first time. Still not anything that shifts though, right? You're still doing, it's still a direct drive kart, right?
Yep. Direct drive. Just slow 206 Sportsman still running on the big track.
Slow compared to cars, but I've done a little karting. It's not as slow as you might think it is. It's still, especially when you're 7, I can only imagine. It might feel slow though on a big track because you've got really long straightaways to get yourself from corner to corner. So in that case, it might feel a little slow. I can imagine that. So let's talk about your transition then from a kart to a car. How did that go about?
So the first time I got into a race car was when I was 13 years old. I did the Lucas Oil School of Racing beginner session at Mid-Ohio. It all went fairly well. The overall driving of the car was, it's a car is an oversized go-kart from my point of view, obviously starting from karts. And I was lucky enough to start my car career on a track that I had known, Mid Ohio. I've driven that on a kart in a kart multiple times. So overall, the adjustment wasn't too big. The biggest things for me were just like braking, shifting things, getting used to those rudimentary tasks that Lucas Oil School helped me work on in that short amount of time.
Sure, sure. So now you're 13, right? You said? So you don't have
Yes,
a
yes.
driver's license yet.
Nope.
So where did you learn how to operate a stick shift? Maybe I don't want to know the answer to that question either.
Oh, I can answer this one. I'm confident in the answer. Yeah. So luckily the Lucas Oil cars are paddle shift,
Okay.
but I can still answer that question. When I was 12, driving home from or I guess, quote unquote, driving home, we were in front of my grandma's house leaving, and my dad walked over to the passenger side and told me to get into the driver's seat of a 6-speed manual Jetta and told me to drive home. And
We're getting dad
so,
into a lot of trouble tonight.
yeah.
All right, so you didn't go to the driver's school without any experience with a shifter, but limited, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah.
How was that first school? I mean, you know, that's kind of throwing yourself from right into the heat of the fire there, right?
Yeah, I think uh, I don't necessarily expect, or I can't imagine a better way to start getting into cars than going into a school like that.
Right.
I was lucky enough that when we had first gone into the school, we registered, and there was no one else registered for the beginners session. And usually, when that happens in the Lucas Oil School of Racing, they cancel the session and provide a refund. But they decided to give a bit of a mock trial to see how a hypothetical private class would go, where it was just one-on-one with an instructor. And so I, following the rules of racing, I was incredibly lucky, and I got a private class at Mid Ohio Sports Car Course. I was able to get onto the track completely alone.
Wow.
Yeah. So either way, when I've talked to other people who have done that beginner class, we learn the same things. So just, things that I still use today, even after racing FE2 and Formula Ford and all these different cars, I've been able to apply everything I've learned. Biggest thing for me was obviously braking after I've mentioned that.
Lucas Oil school cars are essentially Formula Fords, right?
Yeah, they're a little bit tuned down. They have no downforce, just like Formula Ford.
Right.
They do use radial tires,
Sure.
and then they are paddle shift 5-speed instead of the H pattern 4-speed that Formula Ford has. But aside from that, they're basically the same car.
Got it. And then what was your step from there? Did you go right into an SCCA race after that?
No, so we used that Lucas Oil School to get my SCCA license, which was surprisingly easy even for a 14-year-old. The ability that the Lucas Oil School gives you, there's a very broad range of different series that you can get licensed for. It's a well-trusted school. So yeah, we applied. I got my license at 14, and I didn't do any SCCA races that year, which usually when you don't do an SCCA race with full comp license in a full year, the license gets revoked.
Right.
However, at the very, very end of the season, I managed to get a seat in an F1600 at FRP. And given that that's an offshoot of SCCA and it's a pro series rather than SCCA, which is an amateur or pro-am, I was able to retain my license for the next year.
Got it. So then what did the next year look like?
The next year was just this last season. It was meant to be the silly season where we dabbled around in a bunch of different cars, did a bunch of different things, and really just got my name out there to different people. We were lucky enough to find a great team. After talking to a few people, a few teams, which is something that we kind of do. My father and I, we give a Zoom call to any team that we're interested in just to talk to them and see if they think we're crazy or we think they're crazy. And yeah, so we found Rhinecraft Motorworks, who had originally had an SRF3 seat available for me. But then it was a couple months before when we had planned to race, they had sold the car. So they offered me an FE2 seat instead. And that's when the most recent and full season of my car career began.
Got it. So let's rewind just a second. You went from karts without any shifters and no shifter kart experience to your first school and essentially a Formula Ford, and then one semi-pro race, and then you launch yourself into a season of FE2. And that's a pretty steep learning curve, but and we're going to get into how successful that season went in a second here. But before we do that, I want to just suggest or just talk for a second. You said you talked to a team. That leads me to believe that you don't own your car, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Great. And I say great on purpose because I get a lot of conversations over the years because people know I'm involved with cars, and they come up to me and they say, Brian, how do I get my kid involved with racing? And my first question is, how big is your bank account? And but more appropriately, the question I always ask is, if someone says, I want to buy my kid, buy a car to go racing, and this isn't even just for kids, this is for anybody. I want to buy a car and go racing. And my standard line to people is, don't do that. You've never been on a race car before. You have no idea really what you want to race. Some things look kind of cool and they're interesting to you. But you probably don't have any idea what it takes to put that car together, even if it's a car that's already a race car. You don't have any idea how to maintain it. You don't have any idea what's going to happen on a race weekend. And you could go out and spend literally tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, and then find out 2 weekends in that either you don't like that car or you might not even like racing altogether. It's not a sport for everybody. So my regular recommendation is always rent first, and from the discussions that we've had here, it does make, you guys don't come from a family with a whole background of racers and all that kind of stuff. So you didn't have the support system in place to go out and start running your own car. So the smartest decision you and your dad made was to do it exactly the way you're doing it. And will always be my recommendation when people come and ask me how to get started. So now I'm just going to tell them to listen to this podcast, and then I don't have to go through it over and over and over again. So kudos to you and Dad for going the route you've gone with that. I'm not sure that I would have leapt right into FE2. I think the Spec Racer Ford 3 probably would have been the better choice. But when you said you asked teams if we're crazy, we're all a little crazy to do this. So, and we're going to get into this, to what happened in your first season of FE3 or FE2. And, our listeners will realize that while it sounds crazy, while it probably was a little crazy, and probably still is a little crazy, I think it worked out okay for you. So talk to us about your first race at FE2. I understand it. Well, I know, because we chatted about this before. It's at one of my favorite places in the world. So let's talk about race number 1 real quick.
Yeah. So I guess to start off, I think what you said just before was really great thing. It's always great to think through what you're about to do. And when we first went to the Lucas Oil School, we went to a track that I had known, like Mid Ohio, for my first race in FE2, knowing that it was a pretty fast car. We decided to go to a place that I know. So I have been racing at Blackhawk Farms for 9-10 years now. I've got probably over 2,000 miles at that track alone, and that's the race that we chose to do my first race in the FE2 in.
Very smart.
The biggest thing for us was, I guess there's 2 things. 1, keep the car on the track, and 2, learn how to drive the car. Because I guess those things go hand in hand, but if we only have the car to worry about, that makes things a little bit easier for us.
And back to
So
my discussion before, all you have to worry about is keeping the car on the track and learning how to drive the car, because there's somebody else doing all the other work that might distract you on your first race weekend. So let's put that out there again as an example of why it's great to do it the way you did it. So, did you keep the car on the track all weekend?
no, I didn't. I definitely didn't. On that topic, we'll go into the first race. I qualified second out of I think 6 or 8 cars. It was a solid qualifying for me. I'm fairly proud of it even now. Looking at the video, obviously I felt slow, but it went well for me. And this is mixed class racing, so although we've got a decent sized class, not everyone has a decent sized class, and it's not like we're going to be doing individual races for every single car. So I was sitting alongside a bunch of big bore, 3,000-pound big wings, cars that had probably 100 horsepower on me, just sitting in between 2 of them maybe. So yeah, come first race, I think 2-3 laps in, I outbraked myself staring in the mirror. I ended up in 4th in my first race in FE2.
Nothing to be ashamed of there.
Oh, absolutely not. I was fairly proud of that.
Good job. Good job. So here's something else that comes when you rent a car sometimes. Did your team provide you with coaching?
Yes, they did. So Tony, who is the owner, he provided me with coaching that weekend. And then Max, his son, is another driver, Max Grau. Incredible racer, won the June sprints last year, qualified first in the Indy Runoffs this year, and he helped me a lot through this. So I had a really great group on my side this year.
That's so important for any driver just starting out. Even if you're 40 or 50 years old or regardless, if you can get someone who's got experience in the car you're driving or type of cars that you're driving and can just talk you through things a little bit, that is just it so helps the learning curve, for any driver that's out there. So I'm glad to hear that. Was there a second race in that first weekend?
Yep. So most SCCA races, or I guess all of the majors races, have 2 races. Sunday race was a little bit longer. Qualified second once again, except this time I didn't outbreak myself, and that helped because I won that race.
Okay, wait a second now. So you're 17. You're
15.
At the time. Okay, so at the time you're 15. You're
Yes.
at your first wheel-to-wheel race weekend in an FE2 car. You're like your third time ever in a car where you have to shift, and you won your second race in that first weekend. That's a good weekend. Yeah. That's a good weekend.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, we're writing the Hollywood script here, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right. So from there, let's kind of fast forward through the rest of the first season until we get to what happened here in September. What were there a couple of races? Obviously a couple of races between Blackhawk Farms and what we're really going to talk about here.
Yeah. So we had 3 other races in between Blackhawk Farms and just recently. We ran 2 at Road America. We ran June sprints at Cat Nationals. I won at Cat Nationals, so I had 2 wins on the season, as well as a race at Gingerman, where I podiumed both days.
Cool. Cat Nationals, by the way, folks, those are named after Brian Redman's cat, which is rumored to be buried in the carousel at Road America. And there's a whole legend behind that we're going to do a whole podcast episode on at one point in time. And of course, the June sprints are arguably the second most important road race in the SCCA. I think there's a couple of other races that might argue with me on that. but definitely in the top 5 most important events in the club. And how did that experience go for you?
So a small detail about this race is that it was my second race in the FE2.
Let's just go the easy route.
Yeah, yeah. We somewhere in our thought process, we decided that having a quote unquote practice race before the Cat Nationals would be a good idea.
And you
Uh,
chose the June sprint.
yeah, and that's not something I recommend. We made some mistakes this season, although it went well. We made some mistakes. I wouldn't necessarily say this was a terrible mistake, but I don't think I would do it again if I were in that situation. It was intense, 28 cars in the field, or no, sorry, 20 cars in the field. Luckily, all went well. I finished 11th both days, and I got some experience running in a pack with a bunch of other FE2s the same speed as me.
And that's so valuable, even though it was in that situation, kind of, again, throwing yourself right into the fire quickly from the frying pan into the fire. That's experience that you survived it, thankfully, and now you have that experience in your driver's memory bank to be able to take it with you to what comes next. Of course, you said you won the Cat Nationals. You went down to was it Gingerman? You said.
Yeah, Gingerman.
Okay, so Gingerman was your other race. You put enough points together and had enough race finishes to qualify you to do a race at a location that just about every racer in the United States who loves road racing and especially open wheel racing, dreams of being able to race at. And that is the SCCA Runoffs. That enough is big enough. But in addition to qualifying for the national championships, you qualified as whatever age you are now, the ripe old age of whatever age you are now, to go race at the
16.
Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So,
yeah.
So you'd mentioned to me in a previous discussion that you'd been to Indy before. But what's it like going through the tunnel at Indy, knowing you're going to be racing with, the best in the club at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the same track that IndyCar races on, essentially, in an open wheel winged race car?
I felt badass.
That is so cool.
Yeah, there's definitely something different. And when they say Indianapolis is the racing capital of the world, they really do mean it. Not just IndyCar, but Formula One has been there. NASCAR goes there. Like everyone goes there. And having the privilege to go across the yard of bricks on a car that goes fast is something that I would never actually dream of when I was, 7 years old, puttering around on a little track in a 206 kit kart.
Of course not.
It was mind-boggling to me that at 16 years old, I was there and I was about to race on that track.
That's so cool. How overwhelming was this whole experience going to the Runoffs for you?
You can say overwhelming in so many different ways in so many different contexts, and it was all of them. The fact of not just like racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but I got to live there for 10 days.
That's pretty cool.
And I got to live at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I was living the life of racing. And just like that, the better half of my dream had already come true.
So you can just retire now.
No, I won't go that easy.
Dad's like, yes, that will save me lots of money. Retiring now would be perfect. So let me ask you one other question before we get into how the racing went for you. When I was a kid and racing with my dad, my friends had no idea what we did. oh yeah, you go race cars. Oh, that's kind of cool, and that was the end of it. I never had a chance to tell the kids, hey, we're going to race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. What do your friends think about all this?
So whenever you know, the next year of school starts and things like that, there's always the tell us about yourself and stuff like that.
What did you do on your
And
summer vacation?
I I don't talk about my racing because it's hard for people to understand.
Right.
Obviously before I was doing cars, I would say I race go-karts, and you can tell how that would go.
Yeah.
No one really cares about something like that unless they understand what it is.
Right.
And then recently I've kind of, been more comfortable with saying what I do. And when I was gone for 10 days, that raised some suspicion and people started asking. And most of my friends know. And then after, racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and them seeing me and, that the big wings and all that fun stuff.
And on
I
TV.
kinda, yeah, that too, on TV. And they just, it definitely gives them a better understanding of what I am, and I guess
That's so cool.
it's.
So I'm hoping you took advantage of the test days. You're still a wee young FE2 racer, and this will be your first time on this configuration at Indianapolis. But you did do a kart event there, right?
Yeah.
So now, again, you did a kart event where you did your first school. You did a lot of karting at Blackhawk Farms. You did karting at Road America. Did you ever kart at Gingerman before you went there?
Yes, yeah, I
Okay.
have.
So really smart decisions. Every track you went to on a big car was a track you drove in a kart. So while it doesn't directly transfer over, knowledge is knowledge is knowledge. At least you know when the car is supposed to turn left and when the car is supposed to turn right. That's big. That's a big deal. So now the configuration though that you karted at Indian was not the same configuration as the runoffs, right? But part of it was, right?
Yeah. So we had turn 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 were all together, and although that's a lot of numbers, that was probably about
What, a third of the track?
an eighth of a mile.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah.
So you didn't get the chance to go up into the little turn. What is that? 15, 16 complex before you get onto the short chute, and then you come back into the little infield and then go onto the main straight to make that long drive down to turn 1. All that part wasn't part of what you did in the kart, right?
No, none of
Got it.
that was
Got it.
no.
Okay. So real important to do the test days. Happy about that. How did qualifying go?
So qualifying, spaced over 3 days. We no longer had as many classes. It was FE2 and FA for 2 days, and then one of those days, Wednesday, we had just FE2.
Got it.
So we got a lot of open road, even with the amount of cars on track. The first day of qualifying, you were gridded by Super Tour points. And given that I had raced one Super Tour race, and it was also June Sprints, which was my second race in an FE2, you can imagine that I did not start qualifying very well. I started in third to last, and that session was dedicated to me just getting better position for the next qualifying.
Right. But I'll be honest with you, starting in the back in qualifying when you have multiple qualifying sessions isn't always a bad thing. It gives you a chance to kind of do your thing, not get in the way, learn a little bit. So while it probably didn't seem like a great thing, I would suggest that it probably was beneficial nonetheless.
Oh yeah, I think it gave me, if anything, or I guess if nothing, it gave me the opportunity to see where the best places to pass were.
Got it.
I'm just always going to be looking for opportunity wherever I can in whatever situation I'm in.
Got it. So I'm looking at the qualifying results after the 3 sessions right now, and you qualified 9th out of a field of 28 cars. I don't know all of the names here, but I recognize a bunch of them. And looking at the drivers who qualified behind you, I see a bunch of names that I recognize, and they're all really good race car drivers. So and they're all in pretty darn decent equipment. So qualifying ninth at your first runoffs on your fifth race weekend, pretty remarkable. Congratulations on that. So now you're getting ready for the first race at the runoffs in your career, sitting on the grid, wondering what's coming up, what's going through your mind.
It's definitely, when you talk about senses, this was a sensory overload. You hear everything, you smell everything, you just feel everything that could go wrong. It probably will. Hearts racing. It feels like there's so much going on when in reality all you're doing is sitting down in the car. But then you start thinking about how you're going to make it through turn one, if you're going to make it to turn one, things like that. And even as a new car driver, those are things I don't know the answer to. And going back to the team thing, renting a car, I had people to give me some answers to that. So it was definitely a difficult time for me, just mentally, but I had people to help me through it.
So my suspicion, though, is all of that stuff's going through your head while you're sitting on the grid. All of that stuff is going through your head maybe on the pace lap. Slam on the gas, head down to turn one. We'll talk about whether you made it through turn one the first time or not in a second. But at some point, maybe 1 lap, 2 laps, 3 laps into this race, it's not that it just becomes another race, but it's like every other race you've done before. So it's a lot of that head game is until the action starts, until the green flag falls, and then you get back into it. So you're hurtling down towards turn one with 28 of your closest friends at your first runoffs at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I'm trying to build a suspense here. Did you make it through turn one?
I made it through turn one, and so did everyone else.
Nice.
In front of me and behind me. It was a very, very clean start, and I was happy to see no smoke in my mirrors and no smoke in front of me.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So tell me how the run went.
All right. So definitely a difficult first few laps. I lost 3-4 positions just going through the things I weren't used to. I think I dropped down to maybe 15th overall, and I just couldn't figure out what was going on. Never before, up until this very, very race, I hadn't never driven with a full gas tank. It was cold in the morning. So the car was just very different. Front tires weren't coming in, and they were locking up instead. The weight of the car was just completely different. And so those first few laps were dedicated to me, radioing to my team, what adjustments in car do I need to make, sway bar, brake bias, things like that. How to make me go faster. Yeah.
And we should remind people that go-karts don't have adjustable sway bars or brake bias, right? So yeah. All of that is a new experience for you there as well. So you drop down to 15th, 16th or whatever in the first couple of laps. Eventually, though, you started to figure things out, right?
Yeah. After 5-6 laps, halfway through the first, or I guess quarter of the way through the race, I started gaining back positions. And then, I was far enough away from the cars in front of me that it didn't really look like I was going to gain anything else. And then, sitting in about, I think, 10th, we had our first caution of the race. And that gave me the opportunity to race some more people and gain some more positions.
Got it. And where did you end up finally at the end of, what was it, 19 laps at Indy?
Yeah, so I guess at the end of the race, I finished 8th place. Unfortunately, on the last lap, there was a bit of contact that was protested, and I ended up in 10th. But, still top 10 finish. Top
10 at your first runoffs in your fourth race weekend of your career. I just so cool to talk about. So let's talk real quick about this season and how you guys get done what y'all do, because last I checked, Pribyl was not related to an Unser or an Andretti, and you're all trying to find a way to pay for this whole deal. And you're part of all of that process, even at your young age. Talk to us. I looked at your website and the great bio that your dad sent me. And by the way, if you're a young driver looking for kind of sponsorship, putting together a package that you can show people is really important. And you guys have done a really nice job with that. So, but I looked at your package and you've got 10, 12 sponsors. How did you all work that out? Because typically there's not a ton of sponsorship to be had for SCCA racing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. You know, you don't see it all the time, and we utilized a lot of things about me personally that helped us. You know, we use a lot of networking, emails, just being assertive, but in a good way that they want to see your face. And yeah, so we write letters to different companies, we make phone calls, we meet people in person, and we have acquired, about 12 sponsors, both local and larger sponsors, such as, AMSOIL, things like that.
Well, let's give them a little shout out. I mean, let's not just end with talking about AMSOIL. You got a couple other ones you want to mention here before we get out?
Yeah. So absolutely. We have a couple of local ones. We have Jennings Chevrolet. They've been with us very, very early on, for I think about 10 years now. And they, they're really supportive of us, and they help. It's a car dealership, and we have given them some of our car parts,
Sure.
and definitely helps people ask what they are. We also have Stardust Memorials, which is one of our family friends turned into business partner. They help us out. Definitely, they've for sure been with us since day one. C&M Auto Service, they've helped before we knew anyone with a welder. And when I would break my chassis, they always helped us weld it back together, as well as giving us support, in their shop and things like that. And then on to some of the larger sponsors, we have TriStar Racewear. They provide my suit, comfortable, keeps me safe. Zamp Racing, we use their helmet, neck restraint, glove, and racing underwear. Comfortable, obviously looks cool, things like that.
Nice.
We also have World Bridge Partners, new sponsor this year. Very supportive. They help sponsor our Runoffs weekend. And that's just a list of a few of our sponsors for this year.
So, a lot of questions I always get about sponsorship is, sponsors want value out of what they're spending their money on. Sure, some of them might be a family friend who will say, hey, I like you, I want to support you. But most of the time, sponsors want to get some value out of that. So what kind of value are you able to return to the folks who are helping you out?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, we have our website. Our website gives us, a detailed rundown of what happened on our weekend. We've got a fair amount of followers that go just to our website. We also have a YouTube channel where we add, endorsements, things like that on our videos. Social media, Instagram, Facebook, things like that. And then obviously stickers, big thing. They make the car go. So, yeah, and then car shows as well.
Cool.
We attend them, a couple times a month, maybe, talk to people. We notice when some people point out the stickers and like, oh, I know these guys.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Things like that.
Pretty cool. Well, I gotta tell you, I'm so impressed, both in your accomplishments on the track, and of course the discussion that we've had. You are not your typical 16, 17-year-old out there, and that's pretty awesome. Last question, or last thing I want to just talk about is you're also working like 18 jobs. Is that the case? What did I see in the bio? No, I'm exaggerating slightly, but you're working to raise some money for this as well, not just asking other people to give it to you.
Yeah. So when I wasn't racing, I was working over the summer. I worked a full-time job. washing cars. I also worked at the farmers market over the summer, local, and when I wasn't gone for the weekends, I was working there, and then the day after, I was working washing cars again. Once the school year started, I switched jobs to a part-time job, and now I'm working at an empanada restaurant, and so that definitely takes up some of my time during school, but all in the name of racing, right?
That's right. Exactly. And to all the people out there who say kids are lazy, here's an example of the unlazy kid who wants to go racing, has a passion, and is doing whatever it takes to get it done. Jason, congratulations to you and your family. I know it's a family affair. These things don't happen without family at this stage. You all should be really proud of what you've accomplished.
Yeah, I guess you definitely. I left out one last sponsor, and that is family, and especially my father. When we weren't running with the team, we were obviously running out of him and running, karts. He worked on the karts up until, I, had the motor skills to be able to turn a wrench, things like that, and he taught me how. So, and none of this would have gone anywhere if it weren't for him and it weren't for my mother who let me race in the first place, and then all my extended family who support me throughout these years.
That's funny. I was watching the Formula One race today at COTA, and I heard a term. It's a British term, apparently, and it so exemplifies your experience and my experience. And you guys are having a dads and lads weekend on every race weekend. And like I said, I never heard that term before. And like, that is so perfect for what a family goes through. When they're trying to help a young son or a young daughter make their way through this thing. So congratulations to you guys all. I look forward to keeping an eye on you through the next season. And what's your plans for next year, real quick?
That's a great question that unfortunately we don't have the answer to yet.
Okay.
Last season was supposed to be silly season. It looks like next year is going to be silly season. But I can say one of the great things that happened this season, regardless, was the fact that at Runoffs, by the end of the season, there were a lot of people that I didn't know that knew my name. And we'll see whatever comes to the table.
Well, I'm sure whatever car you get into, you're going to have success in, and I look forward to keeping an eye on it. So thanks again. Have yourself a great night, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure being here.
Real quick before we end today's show, I just want to tell you a little bit about one of the most influential members of our club who has taken his final checkered flag. Longtime New England region member Bob Introne passed away unexpectedly while traveling early in October. He was an SCCA member for 40 years, started flagging turns in the 1970s, quickly fell in love with SCCA motorsports and recruited many of his friends, establishing a corner worker crew called the Road Runners. This team of flaggers became famous in the 70s throughout the St. Louis region, slapping their stickers on cars that visited their stations. He eventually obtained his competition license, then in Spec Racer Ford. Then he moved from corners to race control. As a steward, that's where I got to know Bob. I'll tell you that story in just a little bit. He signed off on hundreds of novice logbooks. He was instrumental in the development of many drivers. Due to his years of service in the Air Force as a chief meteorologist for shuttle launches and DoD projects, Bob was always the region's go-to guy for weather, what to expect during race weekends, but his impact on the region extended far beyond whether drivers would race on wet or dry tires. Leadership was at his core. Through the decades he stepped into to guide the direction and promote the growth of the club at the regional level, within the Northeast Division, and nationally. He served New England region as the regional executive. He was also the Area 1 director for the Northeast Division and spent 2 years as the chairman of the SCCA National Board of Directors. Earlier this year, he was honored with the Castle Stone Steward Award, recognizing him as the Steward of the Year for the Northeast Division. In addition to mentoring up-and-coming drivers, new workers, both flaggers and stewards, he also contributed to long-term projects, including new track development. His first love, though, was always waving flags on a corner. He donned his whites, even if it was just for a session or two, at more than 30 runoffs. His passion for motorsports, it was a family affair. He passed it down through the generations. His wife of 56 years, Carol, flagged by his side for decades. when Bob moved to the control tower. She did too, a constant in timing and scoring. His son Steve and wife Melissa have also become integral members of the SCCA. Steve followed in his father's footsteps and now serves on the New England Region Board of Directors. He raced Spec Racer Ford 3 for 20 years before transitioning to B-Spec. One of Bob's proudest moments, seeing his son on the podium this year at the Runoffs in B-Spec, just a week before he passed away. Bob's grandchildren are also continuing the legacy. They are already working in timing and scoring and preparing to build their own car to continue the Introne family SCCA racing tradition. Real quick, when I became a flag chief in New York region, we worked a lot of races together. Bob was one of the stewards in control while I was up there doing my thing, and he was always very quick but very kind to me when I did something I shouldn't have. He would either just give me that look, and I'm like, yeah, I'd shake my head and say, yeah, I could have done that better. On occasion, he'd pull me aside and we'd have a chat, but always in a very mentorship type situation, very kind to me, and I could see right away why he was such a well-respected member of the SCCA, and I kind of thought to myself that his example was an example that I wanted to follow as an SCCA official. So Bob was meant a lot to me in my early years as a club racing official, and I really appreciated the tutelage that he was able to give me in my couple of years as the flag chief up for New York region at Lime Rock Park. So his service will be November 5th. That's a Friday, 10 a.m. At the Orchard Christian Fellowship in Londonderry, New Hampshire. Anyone who is listening who would like to make it to that service, everyone is welcome. Like I said, we are all going to be we're all going to miss Bob, and our club's a better club today because of Bob. We just want to give our best and our condolences to his family, all of his friends in the New England region, and across the Northeast and across the country. Bob touched so many people. Again, his service, memorial service details, Friday, November 5th, 10 a.m., Orchard Christian Fellowship, Londonderry, New Hampshire. Anyone who would like to join them there and for the service is welcome to. The family's requesting no flowers, but as a dedicated veteran, they do say if you'd like to make donations to the Disabled American Veterans Organization, that would be most appropriate. Godspeed, Bob Introne. You did good down here, racer. We look forward to seeing you somewhere down the road for a few more laps. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the Racing Wire Podcast Network so you won't miss an episode. It would also be great if you'd leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. You can also follow us on social media, find out who our next guest is, and leave a question. On Twitter, our handle is @RacingWireNet, as in like .net. There'll be a whole new Inside the SCCA every week. Have yourself a great week, and go out and play with some cars.